Hello, guys. It's Chris here from the Football League Hub, otherwise known as United Supremo on Twitter. Obviously, it's been a while, so can appreciate that we podcast was meant to be out in December, but I've had a lot of things going on, so unfortunately, I was unable to release it. But here we are. Firstly, I want to say I hope you guys had a good Christmas and Happy New Year. So we're going to talk about Manchester United today. We're going to talk about some of the updates that I've got in terms of are United looking in the market? Are there going to be any particular outgoings? What's going on inside the club? And we'll address those issues as we go. Firstly, I want to talk about yesterday's result. It looks like Rangnick is not doing his usual style of play, so there's no pressing going on, and some of these players look quite lost. I'm not going to name a few. If you follow my Twitter, you know who they are. The mood in the camp is quite low. Some of the players don't understand why some other players are playing. So there's a lot of issues that still linger at the club, even with obviously the new manager coming in that hasn't resolved some of those issues. So still a lot of concerns going on in the club, and you can see that on some of the performances. They've got lucky in a few other games and managed to grind out some results. And Wolves completely dominated them yesterday, which you don't expect from someone who's at their own home ground at Old Trafford. I think Wolves had like 8 or 10 shots within 20 minutes, and it was just, you could see Wolves wanted it more, and United just didn't look like they wanted it at all. And there was no control. So a lot of issues at the club. All I would stress is it's going to take a while to get rid of that 3 years of mentality of not having those kind of tactics and going through that. And obviously, start of the season wasn't great with who the manager was previously. So it's going to take a little bit of time till, obviously, Rangnick, is he going to get enough time? 6 months? You would argue no, but let's see what happens there. But it's not looking great at the moment from Manchester United's point of view. And they do have a lot of average players that are extremely overhyped, were extremely expensive, and now they're asking to do actual tactics, actually pressed. You can see that they don't have the ability, or they're just not good enough. Which, in the long term, that might be something that's useful to see who is actually worthy of being a Manchester United player. So let's see what happens in the coming months with that. So let's talk about transfers, because I appreciate people getting frustrated and expecting transfers to hit every minute of the day. And midfield is a massive issue for Manchester United. Obviously, we're now on the 4th of January, which again, the first couple of days you're not going to hear much. Normally in the second or third week is when transfers start to get going, because people don't want to pay over the odds. Fees are quite high in January because the window is in a season, not after season. So replacements are a little bit more difficult to come by. So obviously, those sort of things. So Manchester United will be looking at like players that are sort of close towards the end of their contract, or that are not too expensive. So if you're looking for the likes of Declan Rice for 100 million, that's not going to happen in this window. So you can forget about those kind of fees. They'll be looking for something a little bit lower than that. So the first thing I want to say is, let's talk about the recent striker or attacker that's been linked to Manchester United, Julian Alvarez from River Plate, who looks like hot property. A lot of clubs have shown their interest and scouted him, and obviously he looks like a good talent. So, and he's reasonable cheap, 17 million release clause, 20 million euros release clause. Not been a lot of noise though from the English media. A lot of the noise has come from obviously Argentina, which is expected because that's where he's playing his football. The only thing I would say with this is that Manchester United have not negotiated anything. So they haven't entered any negotiations. They don't have to, of course. They could just go and pay a release clause, and then just a sort of contract out there. There is some level of interest, but it's not like they're going to sign him within the day. So there's not a lot of traction at the moment with that deal. And I do, from what I know, is the agent is trying to ramp up the interest, and I have said that, and I had that confirmed that the agent is sort of driving up the interest for his player and ultimately the player is going to take his time to choose a decision. Same way as what happened with Camavinga, and he ended up going to Real Madrid. So Manchester United are certainly not the favourites for Julian Alvarez, and a lot of noise saying it's close to be completed. Nothing's come from the English side. We've heard nothing about Man United saying they're going to go and sign this player. So from our perspective, is that isn't a close deal. So I don't know where it's coming from, Argentina. But again, we had this with another individual that ended up at Brighton, but Manchester United never negotiated. So a lot of times, clubs will use Manchester United, unfortunately, for their players to ramp up interest. And that is just the way it is. Because Manchester United always look incredibly desperate in the transfer market and always overpay, and clubs and agents feel like they can take advantage of that. Hopefully that will change over the next 3 or 4 years, because people saying it previously changed, it hasn't. There's still pays stupid amount of money for players. You look at Harry Maguire for 80 million and Wan-Bissaka for 50, and then you got Donny van der Beek, they don't even play, so they don't. There's no particular strategy involved at United at the moment. So there is nothing in that. And at the moment, if I do get anything else to say that they're going to pay his release clause, I certainly will treat it. But again, it's agent interest. Inter Milan, Juventus, even Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United, Bayern Munich. There's been so many clubs that are interested or scouted this player. So we'll have to see what happens with that one. But, it's a cheap deal to do. If you look on the flip side, you could do this incredibly quickly because the wages won't be high. You'd have to pay someone under 100 grand. You won't have to pay more than that a week. So we'll have to see. But at the moment, there is nothing in particular with Julian Alvarez. So let's talk about the midfield. I don't want to criticise the midfield too much, but Manchester United's midfield looks quite atrocious at the moment. There is no control in the middle of that park. A lot of people on Twitter and a lot of accounts always overhype Manchester United players, and that's up to them. It doesn't bother me either way. I just talk about transfers and what's going on. But Scott McTominay and Matic in the midfield is simply not good enough. They don't have enough control. When Fred plays with Scott McTominay, they don't play well together. So there's a lot of issues in that midfield, and they're not in the top 10 clubs for those particular midfields in the Premier League. So they've got to sign a midfielder in January. The Glazers are concerned about the top 4. They've openly said that. That's the whole reason why Solskjaer got sacked, because they felt that he wasn't going to get top 4, which is absolutely why he wouldn't have done, because the performances were atrocious, and they've continued to be that way this season. And I have said that players are the majority of the problem because their mentality isn't a winning mentality that they've had for the last 4 years installed in them. So obviously the managers who's coming is struggling to change that mentality, and it's not going to happen overnight. And a lot of fans are impatient, and unfortunately it just does not happen overnight. You can't change a team within 4 weeks. So but again, you've got to look at the team and say, actually, well, they're not working. We're going to have to change players out. And he hasn't done that. That's another side. He hasn't done the subs. Why he took Greenwood off yesterday, when arguably he was the best attacking player up front for Manchester United. So there's those sort of questions. I understand them completely. But again, you can't change things straight away. But what I will say is that the manager, Rangnick, has said to the board that they need to look for a midfielder in January, because otherwise they're not going to get top 4. Donny van der Beek sitting on the bench because he's too technical for some of these average players, and that's the truth. I mean, happened to Solskjaer and is now happening with Rangnick. There's a player that I like and I have been tracking for the last 3 or 4 years, and that's Kamara from Marseille. And he's out of contract in the summer. And he's already told Marseille he doesn't want to sign a new contract. And he's available for 10 to 15 million pounds. However, Manchester United, what they've done so far in the last 3 weeks is they've reached out to the representatives of Kamara and said, would he like to come to Manchester United? Kamara rejected Newcastle. I don't see him going there unless it's a last-minute option and they have a relegation clause put in. Fine. But Manchester United can do this deal for 10 to 15 million. Kamara has said that he would go to Manchester United. Expects to play week in, week out, which wouldn't be too difficult. You know, even Pogba has said that Kamara would be a good player to get in. He's had his say on a few people, like Varane. He said the same thing for Solskjaer. Kamara would like to go to Manchester United, but however, at the moment, there is no advanced negotiations with Marseille. Manchester United have not attempted any negotiations at all with Kamara, which I don't fully understand why they haven't, because he's worth at least 40 to 50 million. And I'm being polite when I say 40 to 50, it could be more. If you look at how much the English midfielders paid, like Grealish for 100 million, Declan Rice for 100 million, that's 200 million pound on two players that I don't consider world class. You got to start looking outside of your network of English players and looking at these types of signings, which is what Rangnick is trying to enforce at United. So there's a deal to be made with Kamara there between 10 and 15 million pounds. But United have yet to negotiate. Now, I don't expect it to be a long negotiations because Marseille will want to sell him because he'll go out of contract anyway. So there's an opportunity for Kamara. And let's see what if Manchester United can do it. There's other clubs that would like to look at him. Chelsea at one point looked at him. Arsenal at one point, but obviously Thomas Partey's been proving his performances. Newcastle looking at him might go there because he could offer crazy wages and give him a relegation clause. And I think Bayern Munich and another club are looking at him at the moment. But as I said, Manchester United have an option now. Good player, solid player, massive upgrade from what the current midfield is. So let's see in the coming days if they negotiate. Results will kind of determine where they are because they're way off the pace of top four at the moment. So Kamara is an opportunity there. Rangnick has said that he does need control. They had no control yesterday. And if you looked, I sent out a video of Scott McTominay. The way he performed yesterday, was completely different the way he performed against Burnley because he's not consistent. I'm sure I'm trying to be as polite as possible. I'm sure there's a fairly good player there, but not a starting player. So Man United need to get over the fact that he's not good enough and start signing players that are. And they've never addressed that issue. And it's always been an issue for the last 7 years in midfield for Man United. So they need to start looking at it. The attacking area is fine in my theory. They're just not getting enough service or they're not going through the phases enough. So Kamara is an opportunity for Manchester United. All right. Then we've got Dennis Zakari, who is incredibly cheap. From what I was speaking to someone about, that's close to some German clubs, you can get him for 8 million. 8 million for Zakari. 8 million. I mean, 8 million. And that's 10% of what Man United paid for Maguire. Who you can get him on cheaper wages. It's mental, isn't it, how football works with transfer fees. Now, he's already told them that he's leaving the club. So Zakari's available now. Zakari would go to Manchester United without a shadow of a doubt. Now, this player is like Borussia Dortmund want him. Bayern Munich have looked at him. Juventus have looked at him. Even Barcelona looked at him at one point. PSG looked at him. There's so many clubs that like him. So you're going to have to do it quickly because he will leave in January if the white club comes in. Otherwise, he's gone. So the Manchester United interest dates back since 2019. So they've always looked at him. Rangnick thinks he's a quality player. So it's a no-brainer, really. And again, the same thing as what they've done with Kamara is they've reached out to the representatives of Zakari and said, would he like to come to Manchester United? So I'm pretty sure that he's come back and said yes. So there's a deal to be done there. So you can get Kamara and Zakari for under £20 million. That's a quality market. If you buy those two players for under £20 million, I would arguably say that's probably the best signings that Manchester United have done post-Ferguson because they haven't done great signings since then. But to do those two deals under £20 million will show that Manchester United mean business and they want to save the season. So it's down to the Glazers at this point, is that they've reached out to both of those players' representatives. They would like to sign both of those players. So, but you have to put your money where your mouth is. And the Glazers are concerned about the top four. If you get those two players in, I would argue to say that Manchester United should get top four this season. The midfield is such a massive issue at Manchester United. You watch every single game that they play week in, week out. And you can see from the defence to the midfield, and then the midfield to the attack, they just don't sync together. There's no control. There's too many touches in the middle of the park. The passing, they can't even pass. I mean, I can't fathom it. You know, what these managers see in some of these players. So they need to start doing that. Now, Zakari is available. He's available for £8 million. Let's hope that United in the next week or so will try and advance on negotiations on one of those players at the very least. I would get both in, but at the very least, get one of them in. Because what you're doing at the moment is you've said that you want a midfielder, and you've been saying it for many windows, and you've never done it. So why? You've got so many good midfielders out there now. There is no excuse not to sign one of these midfielders that's under 20 million. There's no excuse. I won't, if I don't get any news coming out of Old Trafford that they haven't negotiated for a midfielder, then United can completely write off their season for the rest of the few months, because they're just going to get dominated. If you get dominated by Wolves, you're not going to get, I would be surprised if they beat Atletico Madrid in the Champions League, because they will get dominated in the midfield. And they will get dominated by the bigger teams, which they have. Look at Liverpool, absolutely destroyed them. The midfield is not good enough. And, as a neutral, people can see it. The Man United fans can see it. But for some reason, the club continue to evade that situation. They cannot do that. So they do have to get a midfielder in this window. Otherwise, the season's finished. The season's finished. And maybe they want that. Maybe the Glazers don't actually care about the top four anymore. Have we ever thought about it in that sense? Because Ronaldo made him so much money in the summer. And he will again if he stays for another season, which we can contemplate. We'll talk about that maybe another time, because we're not there at that point. But, they keep giving mixed signals out. They keep saying they care about top four. So put your money where your mouth is. And yes, they've spent a lot of money in the summer, but they made it all back. So they need to reinvest again. And that's what they don't understand. And they need to start doing it smartly. And you've got two players. Look, you're not playing Donny van der Beek. So why don't you sell him for 30 million and then get these two players in? If you're not going to play Donny van der Beek, you've got two players there that you can play, Or you could sell Martial. I think he should be given another chance. But you could sell Martial for 20 or 25 million and bring these two players in. You're not playing Donny. You're not playing Martial. And, Pogba's injury, I think that's gone on too long. I think something else is going on there, because the injury doesn't look that severe. I'm sorry, but, I will say that. If you're not playing them, sell them and get these two in. So that's where I don't understand. But again, just to summarise, after my rant, those two players have been contacted by Manchester United, but there has been no advanced negotiations yet. Same thing for Julian Alvarez. There will be some interest there from Manchester United, because they've scouted him, but they haven't spoken since. So yeah, that's where we are with those ones. Now, Ousmane Dembele from Barcelona. This is an interesting one, because there's been a lot of news recently about Anthony Martial potentially going to Barcelona and Dembele going the other way. Now, Martial wants to leave, as we know, and he wants to go to the La Liga as a potential place, and he wants to make sure that he's starting most games so that he can go to the World Cup. And he won't do that if he stays at United, because he's not going to be playing. And most players that don't play do not end up in major competitions for their international club. So, what's the situation around this? Dembele rejected a contract from Barcelona recently in negotiations. And this was before they signed Ferran Torres. So you can imagine why he's a little bit mad. So, but then on the flip side, he's always injured, right? So it's a difficult one. So Barcelona offered him a contract. I think it was around 220,000 a week, but he wants more than that. He wants about 300k a week, and he wasn't happy with that. So, and it was, I believe, a slight deduction. So he's gone and said, okay, well, I'm not going to sign that. And they've also gone and signed Ferran Torres for 55 million euros and gave him a fairly decent contract, by the way. He's around 200,000. You can't play at the moment, so you can't have both of those players, can you? He can't even be registered. So they're going to have to sell someone. And Dembele's rejected his contract. They've got Ferran Torres coming in. You know, they've got a lot of attacking threat. They've got Ansu Fati. They've got Memphis Depay. You know, they've got a lot of good midfielders. So there's issues at Barcelona where they're not going to opt the contract from Dembele. Dembele would like to stay, but it's got to the point where it's got extremely complicated in that deal now. So Dembele almost joined Manchester United before Man United signed Sancho the year after. But he said no because obviously he didn't think he was getting a lot of playing time. Now, the issue we've got here is this isn't an easy deal between Martial and Dembele. Now, they did speak early in December. It was the first week of December, I was told, that Manchester United spoke to Barcelona in regards to a Martial-Dembele swap. But there hasn't been any more negotiations since. And we've seen that Barcelona are looking at strikers, so maybe they've moved on from the Anthony Martial thing. They might move back into it. But Martial wants to leave, and we'll talk about the outgoing part of Martial later on in the podcast. But there might be potential there, but at the moment there hasn't been any negotiations for the last 4 weeks or so. But they have been in contact. Manchester United definitely need something else in attack. But again, I will stress this. Don't buy someone like Dembele if you're not going to get a midfielder, because it's absolutely pointless. You could go and spend £1 billion on players and still have the same midfield, still the same issues. You look at it. They've got Ronaldo. They've got Sancho, Greenwood, Rashford, who has been out of form, but hopefully he picks up. You will see. Cavani. They've got so much attacking threat up front that they shouldn't be having this issue, but they have because of the midfield. So they need to sign a midfielder first. So they can't be talking about this. And they have to sell Martial to get a striker in. So I just don't. I think it's a very complicated deal to do. So it's massively unlikely that it's going to happen. If I get any changes or anything that happens, I will let you know. But at the moment, there is nothing advanced. There is no negotiations between both of the clubs. We'll have to see in the coming next 10 days, I would suggest, on that one. Now, there was a lot of talk when Rangnick came in about Amadou from RB Leipzig. So he is a good midfielder. He's a little bit more expensive than Zakari and Kamara is around. So Amadou's worth around 35 million, I believe, euros. Also, Rangnick loves this player, so there's potential. The player would love to go to Manchester United. But again, there's no advanced negotiations, there's no talks. So this is another player that wants to go to Manchester United. So we've got 3 people that are twerking for Manchester United at this point in time. And none of them at the moment have got advanced negotiations. So where we are with the midfielders is that Manchester United have reached out to all of these players. They've not proceeded with advanced negotiations yet. Maybe next week I get something different, but at the moment, no advanced negotiations with any midfielders. But I will stress there has to be that there's clear intention from Manchester United that they want a midfielder because they've reached out to the representatives. So they've put their name out to them and say, yeah, okay, well, we want a midfielder. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't have that part. So there's some good positive news around that, is that they have made it clear that they will look for a midfielder in this window, and they have said to some of the players that they're interested, we might come back in to bid for you. So we'll see what happens with that in the coming days. But that's the positive part of that. And that's it in terms of the signings and those sort of things. If you have any comments around what you would like to see at Manchester United, who you would like to see in January, who you might want to see get sold, what do you think about the current status of the club? What's going on? Do you think Rangnick can turn this around in the next 5 months? Let me know in the comments section below. But we're going to just talk a little bit about outgoings now. Okay? We'll talk about Martial first, briefly. So Martial, Manchester United want all the wages covered if he goes out on loan. If he's sold, they want around 30 to 35 million, which they can reinvest in that. They will reinvest that in. They want Martial gone before they go for an attacker. So that's a complicated deal. I can see Martial staying, which would be an absolute shambles. If he's not playing, you got to play him or sell him. So likely to be gone this January window, probably the most likeliest of transfers to be gone, apart from Amad Diallo, which we'll talk about in a minute. Mata's likely to go. Manchester United have already given him blessings to say that he can look at other clubs, and they would terminate his contract if he finds a new club. Otherwise, he's leaving in the summer anyway. I believe Real Sociedad have looked at him, and Villarreal, funnily enough, have looked at John Mata. So there are a few interests, and he would like to go back to Spain. So keep an eye out on Jean Mata. There won't be, if there was a transfer fee, it would be nothing. So Manchester United giving their blessings for him to look. Amad Diallo should be going out on loan. Feyenoord maybe still, but there are a few other Premier League clubs. Crystal Palace back in, potentially looking at a loan for him. Brentford were looking at it at some point. So there are a few other Premier League clubs and Championship club, I believe, looking at Amad Diallo, but Manchester United want to loan him at a top level to continue his progress. And Donny van de Beek expected to stay. Don't see him going this summer, so we should see that. And obviously Cristiano Ronaldo will stay. He won't be going in January window. Dean Henderson, still an opportunity for him to maybe leave, but at the moment the club has said that they would rely on him in case David De Gea, God forbid, gets injured. So but Dean Henderson would love to leave Manchester United, even if it's on loan, because he wants to start playing and cement a potential England place for the World Cup. So that's where his issues lie. He could force something in January, but we'll have to see from there. Loads of clubs have been interested in him, one being actually Spurs, and there's been a few other. I think Newcastle were looking at him at some point, and those sort of clubs. So few outgoings, potentially more. I would suggest, unfortunately, more outgoings than incomings in this window. But as I said, guys, it's a very shortish, longish podcast today. Thank you for listening. I appreciate that I've been quite absent for the last 5 to 6 weeks, but I've been extremely busy doing other stuff inside football and some of my other investments I do. So I've not had time. I've had a lot of updates in the last month, which unfortunately sometimes I'm unable to deliver to you because I just don't have the time to go through and sort of verify it to make sure that they are 100% accurate, because I don't send out news that isn't. So that's what it is. But we're in the transfer window now, so I've got a little bit more time because they set it aside from all of my other investments and stuff that goes on. So hopefully we'll have more. There'll be another podcast next week on transfers to any updates that I would potentially get this Friday, which tends to be most times that I get my updates is every Friday. We might be getting stuff every Tuesday now because the window is shorter in the summer, so more people will connect and have chats with me about it. So we'll have to see what Manchester United do, but they do need to get a midfielder. But we'll express it again that if they want to get top 4, they have to sign a midfielder this summer. They have to show their intentions. The Glazers, again, it's a test of their ownership. They've got an opportunity here with a few players at cheap prices, so it's time for them to show what they can do in the market. They want Rangnick for the future after his interim manager role, which we'll talk about managers in the next couple of weeks, because there might be some progress on that. There isn't anything at the moment. But if they want to support Rangnick in his role for the next 2 or 3 years, then back him now in this window, because you told him that he wanted structure or change the club. So it's going to be an interesting one. And let's see what happens, guys. But make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe, share. Keep an eye out on United Supremo on Twitter. Not so much Football League Hub. That will be used eventually for something in the summer. Just Manchester United news at the moment. I deliver all the other club news outside of Twitter anyway. So people that want to see that, message me and I'll see if I can get you involved. But anyway, thanks for listening, guys, today. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we get some more positive news, and I'll make sure that I obviously deliver that accordingly. But thanks, guys, and continue to have a good new year.